This is a video from a couple of months back. It's part of the series on Khabib and McGregor I've been working on. I had intended to get this in the final part up before Dustin versus Khabib, but a couple of things came up on my end and I just couldn't get to it. I am working on something on Nate and possibly Masvidal, so I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this series next, but I will be finishing it soon. This video has been on Patreon for a while, so I might as well stick it up now.
Советские борцы широко. И точность выполнения бросков подворотом.
In Dagestan, they don't have Ritalin or Adderall. If your child's acting like a hyperactive asshole, they take him down the street, throw him at some other hyperactive little asshole, and let him wear each other the fuck out in a wrestling mat. The poverty of the country is one of the many factors that has created the conveyor belt of Olympic champions. These guys aren't playing tennis, there's no malls in the mountains, but wrestling is practically free. And when you combine that with the often government-supported pedestalization of Dagestani champions I've already discussed, what you get at the youth end of society are participation rates unlike anywhere in the world. As Patrick Wyman of Bloody Elbow put it, just about every child growing up in Dagestan wrestles at some level or another, participating in a constant, brutal cycle of competition designed to cull the very best wrestlers from the pack and prepare them for the next level in a ladder culminating in Olympic gold. And when it does culminate in Olympic gold, the result in a wrestling-crazed nation can be superstardom. When Sadulayev recently won another world championship, it was cheered on and celebrated by thousands of young kids in gyms all over the country. Check out the guy's Instagram. He's worshipped by the youth, worshipped as a personification of their own hopes and dreams. The whole country acts as a foundry for champions. Every child grows up surrounded by wrestling, supplying a near-endless field of talent that feeds into a survival of the fittest style process of elimination. Tens of thousands of boys go in as youths, and out of that, a small number of world champions emerge at the other end of the factory. The coaches oversee the whole process, and as men of knowledge who represent the key to unlocking a better life, they are revered. Coaches are held in high esteem. After their careers in competition are over, many wrestlers choose to become coaches and mentors. For young boys, the wrestling gyms serve as daycare. Parents leave boys at the sites for hours after school. For young wrestlers, the coach is a father figure and a moral guide. Now, if you were trying to communicate just how deeply ingrained in a society wrestling is, surely that is the quote. For younger boys, the wrestling gyms serve as daycare. For younger wrestlers, the coach is a father figure. These guys are raised on a fucking mat. Coaches and teachers are well aware of their role as moral guides, and critically, the role of sports in directing young men away from going into the woods. As Arsen Saitiv, the principal of a school in Dagestan's capital Mahajkala, explains, anyone who achieves something in sports feels confident. He doesn't need to prove anything to anybody, and he won't try to achieve fame in a negative way. Mostly those who join the underground are adolescents. At this time in their lives, they are trying to prove something. They can find themselves in sports instead, and won't get involved in this stupidity. So from the impoverished 6-year-old to Olympic stars, from coaches to heads of state, Combat sports and wrestling is woven into the fabric of society to an almost religious extent. When Adam Saiteev said wrestling is a way of controlling the masses, it was a paraphrasing of a Karl Marx quote. The difference being the concept of religion had been replaced by wrestling. 2016 Olympic wrestler Adam Badarov further framed wrestling in this light. We always wrestled. The followers of the Prophet also wrestled. Wrestling came to us with Islam. But even for those who excel at sports, there is still a risk of catastrophe. There are many stories of athletes walking the path of Abu Vaizar or Abdul Rashid only to suddenly find themselves on a road to ruin, as was the case of Ramazan Saratov, who almost made the Russian Olympic team in 2004 and 2008. He met an untimely end in a 2012 firefight with the authorities. He was wanted for attacks on stores that sell alcohol. Worst I'm getting is a hangover. You go for a beer in Dagestan, you might get your fucking ears blown off, stumble out of the bar with your hair on fire. And that's not an isolated case. There were many more high-level fighters who met a similar end. And so two paths diverge for many young Dagestanis. One is the road to a better life, the other is almost certain ruin. Which finally brings me to Khabib Nurmagomedov. For him, the most critical piece of the puzzle helping him navigate his journey has always appeared to be his father Abdulmanap. To repeat some of the points of a previous video, having himself come through the system I've just described, Abdulmanap was not a man to be fucked with. He started wrestling at 8, joined the army at 19, and he was soon building a resume. He took national championships in judo and combat sambo, but the most coveted trophy in his cabinet is a Dagestani national championships in freestyle wrestling. He would eventually transition to the inevitable final role of many talented athletes, that of the respected coach and mentor. And so Khabib grew up in the unforgiving military-style training regimen I've previously discussed, where the central tenets appeared to be discipline, physical punishment, and hard work. Abdulmanap wasn't afraid to stick his boot in your ass, and Khabib and many other young fighters are grateful for it. It's shameful to offend the father or an elder. If you're punished, it means you deserved it. Despite spending a lot of time in America, Khabib has shown clear signs of conservatism with respect to his homeland. Last August, the Azerbaijani rap duo Hamali and the V performed in Dagestan. This prompted Khabib to comment, "Modern Dagestan, is this what was bequeathed to us by our righteous predecessors?" Hilariously, Islam Makhachev added, "Fuel for hell." I mean, talk about over the top. This guy would happily shovel rap fans into a fucking furnace. Khabib was taunted by his compatriots for his blatant self-righteousness, with comments like, "Making homeless people do push-ups for money. Is this what was bequeathed to us by our righteous predecessors?" Now, that's a pretty good rebuttal, and it prompted Khabib to make a more full comment and really flesh out his views on the West and modern Dagestan. If I make a statement in my posts, it does not mean that I am such a fine fellow, and all of you who read my posts are sinners. This is not so. First of all, I remind myself of this, and only then my subscribers, because I need a reminder. We're all sinners, some less and some more. There are no ideal people. But we have to admit that Dagestan needs a reminder. And if athletes like me silently observe what is happening in our republic, then what will we come to? Just look at the past few months and how many children we lost in Mahajkala. I'm not talking about other problems. Politics do not interest me, and I'm not a deputy. This is not a political post. I, as a Dagestani, worry about my republic and what happens in it. And so it's very clear from that statement that Khabib is a devoutly religious conservative who finds the spread of Western culture in his homeland concerning. It echoes a sentiment expressed years ago by the more devout Saiteev brother. The image of Europeans that we see in the movies is not acceptable to a Muslim. No way. And so this was the context out of which Khabib Nurmagomedov has come. A deeply religious society in a region prone to conflict. A country where wrestling infrastructure forms the backbone of society. Coaches and elders such as Khabib's father are held in high esteem, where rich oligarchs and controversial heads of state will go to considerable lengths to position themselves alongside champions. A culture where backing down from a fight is a fucking disgrace, and a place where young boys spent their formative years grappling with the idea of a fight with far greater consequences and win bonuses and title shots, where it was a matter of life and death. These are all parts of the world Khabib grew up in, and by extension, for better or worse, they are all part of what made him the man he is. And that is a seemingly unstoppable force who grinded his way through the lightweight division, never losing a round on a judge's scorecards. All those variables created a figure with a growing aura of invincibility, a fucking monster in the lightweight division. But in 2018, Khabib would run into a man who would try to take each and every one of these elements and try to make them work against him. Conor McGregor would try to make them a bird and a bear, create a scenario where Khabib would have to defend the honor of every important thing in his life, and do so in front of the world on an unprecedented level. We've seen some incredible fighters crumble under that kind of pressure. As usual, the strategy behind McGregor's mental warfare was to make the fight about far more than a belt or money or maintaining an undefeated record. Being an ultra-high-stakes player he is, Conor would make the fight about identity, Khabib's identity, and by extension the identity of his countrymen. One by one, McGregor would try to tear down Khabib's background, heritage, and all those things Khabib holds dear. In doing so, by pushing those buttons, he would provide the fuel for a spectacle that would simply transcend the sport, to become a culturally significant event for millions of people. You know, we know McGregor has many admirable characteristics. His rise was nothing short of inspirational. He came from nothing, used a combination of deadly skills and pure charisma to take himself from $0 to $100 million in just a couple of years. He was intense, single-minded, at times philosophical, and a complete visionary in the sport of MMA. But if you imagine his image from the perspective of culturally conservative Dagestanis concerned about the spread of Western culture in their homeland, he was the perfect villain, the perfect representation of those elements of Western culture they would regard as morally corrosive, or at least antithetical to their way of life. It was an absolutely fucking perfect matchup, a glorious clash of cultures. Khabib Nurmagomedov could fight for 10 careers and never get the type of opportunity Conor McGregor was about to present him. And that was the opportunity for sporting immortality among his countrymen, who would watch him compete in a physical contest within which the nation's identity had become embroiled. All Khabib would have to do to reach that legendary status was the very thing he had never once failed to do, and that was to win. But this time, win with the weight of a nation hanging like a weight around his fucking neck. Khabib was about to find out what it's like to play mind games with the fucking master, the most ruthless, ultra-high-stakes motherfucker in the game. Things were about to get ugly.
My boots, my things, my daily things. It's the counterfeit again. Take it slow, take it easy. Shit's loud, shit's loud. Take it slow, take it easy. Shit's loud, shit's loud.
Shawnee C, awesome video as usual. Everything you do that features Dagestan blows my mind. As nations, Dagestan and Ireland have one thing in common. They've both been subject to two empires, Russia and Britain. As Ireland has found peace and prosperity, perhaps it has softened somewhat with Western decadence. Well, I mean, compared to somewhere like Dagestan, I'd imagine it has. You mentioned in a previous video that there's a Spartan training regimen in Dagestan. Culturally, they're kind of similar too. Classical Spartans were also incredibly conservative and religious. They even share the respect your elder rule. Oh, is that a shot at McGregor? One of the funny things to come out of that recent story, actually, was that as it turns out, the old man was actually 49 at the time of the attack. So apparently he wasn't too happy with the whole world calling him a fucking old man. When I heard that, I was like, 49? Jesus Christ, that guy must never leave the fucking bar. You know, maybe Conor can make it up to him by putting him on the McGregor fast, even the McGregor detox. It's unbelievable. 49, man. It's just, Jesus Christ. I mean, what the fuck is that? Smoking? Booze? I saw someone comment and say, I can't believe he's hitting a 50-year-old. And I was like, 50? That guy's at least 80 years old. I mean, for fuck's sake, man. He needs to get out of that bar and start going for walks, practice some meditation, take up some fucking yoga. 49, man. Jesus Christ. Anyway, thankfully, Dagestanis aren't practicing eugenics or slavery, though. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Hey, great comment, Shawnee C. Jahanzib Habib. Awesome video. The cultural imbalance between the two simply exemplifies the difference in personalities and behavioral traits we see. One thing is for certain, the pool of knowledge Khabib gains from being at AKA with notable champs such as DC, Rockhold and Cain Velasquez sees him excel in areas that are unprecedented to McGregor. I believe this key factor propels him into an area where the tried and tested formula that AKA instills in their fighters will always allow him to surpass McGregor. You know, that's a good point. I want to look at this subject in a separate video, actually. You know, Conor kind of reminds me of BJ Penn. They were both prodigies who dominated to a point, but they both stayed in camps where they were head and shoulders above their sparring partners. I mean, Khabib trains with some of the best fighters in the fucking world, and there's always champions in the camp. While Conor spars with, you know, Artem Lobov. I mean, I know he occasionally brings people in, but he just doesn't have the people around him like Khabib has. The looming question of Tony Ferguson is not a major concern to Khabib. He's had to prepare for the guy 4 or 5 times. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, to be fair, Tony has prepared for Khabib 4 times too. And he is a nightmare fight for anyone. Guy just does not lose. And he will fight to the fucking death. So, you know, I think that is a looming question for Khabib. The scary thing is, Khabib's skill set and striking ability have improved considerably over the last year. The only chink in Khabib's armor is himself. Fueled by victory after victory, how much can he learn from training if nobody has presented a challenge to the skill set he illustrates in the octagon? Well, you know, as you said yourself, Khabib has continued to improve. And he's not planning to have a long career. He's already talking about 2 or 3 more fights. And those 2 or 3 fights could be the greatest part of his legacy. They probably will be. It's Tony, GSP, maybe a McGregor rematch. So I'd imagine motivation to continue evolving, it won't be an issue for him. But, you know, we'll see. Connor Heldman. Amazing video. Well, thanks very much. The cultural difference reminds me of Wilder versus Fury. Not in terms of the culture crossing over from fighter to fighter, but in terms of both fighters growing up in much different situations. Like Khabib growing up in a strict family where his main focus was wrestling, and Conor was a kid growing up in Ireland with self-admitted anger issues, playing other sports like soccer. In comparison, in the Wilder-Fury situation, Tyson grew up as fighting royalty, as his family was known for boxing and bare-knuckle bricking. I like that phrase. Bare-knuckle bricking. Whereas Wilder grew up dreaming of going pro in other sports like football and basketball, until finding a home in boxing. They both climbed their way up to the top and met each other up there. The only difference I see between the two is that Conor versus Khabib left us with a definitive end to the beef. I mean, yes, it absolutely did. The judges fucked Fury in my view. Here's an interesting comment on the perception of the fight from someone who has lived in both the Middle East and in Ireland. Ali Yusuf. I remember talking to a group of people in the Middle East about this fight. To my surprise, many of them did not support Khabib due to his conservatism. This is very significant in my opinion, as it displayed an inner conflict within the Muslim world. Liberal-minded Muslims like myself are growing in numbers and influence in the Middle East, and many of us found ourselves rooting for Conor. I was fully in support of Khabib, not due to identity or religious affiliation. Most of my close friends weren't. My point is, though this fight definitely represented an immensely entertaining clash of two cultures, it also represented an inner conflict in both those different cultures. I live in Ireland 9 months of the year, and I also found that many rabid Conor fans rooted against him in this one, due to his antics and strong verbal attacks. Both figures kindled an inner societal conflict as well as a global one. That's how authoritative these personalities are. It was immensely entertaining to witness. Now, that's a great fucking comment. Very informative. And so true. You know, most of my friends are big McGregor fans. And while they were rooting for Conor in this one, it was much more reluctantly than any of his previous fights. So yeah, I agree with your comment. Very interesting. Thanks a lot for the feedback. Very good feedback for this one.